I kind of wonder if Sanji ever thought about making food for his brothers. I mean, I just, he learns the favorite foods of all of the crew members. To be fair, Jinbei is not listed on here because he was not part of the crew explicitly at the time when this was made. Um, but I wonder if Sanji ever really thought about, like what type of food his brothers would like in regards to, maybe Ichiji likes this, maybe Yonji would like this. I wonder what Niji likes. And even like with Reiju, I wonder if he probably more thought about like, well, I wonder what Reiju would like, given those circumstances, just because she's the one that he had the best relationship with. But I do kind of wonder if he ever thought about trying to figure out what type of food his brothers would like. Probably not necessarily Judge, but at least his brothers. And I mean, that's an appropriate question, given the fact that I'm going to be talking about the Vinsmoke brothers, Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji. Sanji, of course, notwithstanding, because he does not consider himself a Vinsmoke, and the only one out of them that he considers as his family at the moment is Reiju, because he despises his father, which is completely and 100% fair and understandable, and he doesn't like his brothers because of how much they would bully him and mistreat him and everything like that. And because, they lack negative emotions or weak emotions that are some of the more important emotions in order to make someone human. So, as I said, this video is going to be about Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji. So we have Vinsmoke Ichiji, or also known as Sparking Red, who is the eldest son of the Vinsmoke family. He is, of course, also a commander in the Germa army, and of course the prince. Then we have Vinsmoke Niji, or Dengeki Blue, and he is, of course, the second son of the Vinsmoke family, and he is, of course, a prince within the Germa kingdom, and is, of course, one of the military commanders of the Germa Double Six. And then we have Vinsmoke Yonji, or Winch Green, who, no offense, he definitely got the worst naming scheme in that regard. I was like, Sparking Red, fire type of a thing is invoked there. Explosions. Niji, I have electricity. What do you have, Yonji? My arm turns into a really long winch that I can swing people around with? Okay, fine, yeah, whatever. Sanji, I have invisibility. Or at least I did until I broke the frickin' raid suit. So, and then we have, Yonji, who is Winch Green, who is the fourth son of the Vinsmoke family, and is, the prince of the German kingdom and a commander within the, German military, which is, of course, the German Double Six. All of them are 21 years old, same as Sanji, because they are quintuplets. Quadruplets is 4. They're all born at the same time, and, we'll go into why they are so different. So, into the history for the Vinsmoke brothers. Now, some of this is going to be talking about some stuff involving Sanji, but there's going to be other bits where, like, Sanji is mentioned, but it's like, this is mostly just talking about the other 3. So, we know that when they were babies, as in when they were still inside of Sora, we know that Judge performed this experiment on them to give them, enhance their bodies, with the genetic modifications. It also was designed to remove or restrict any of their weak emotions, as Judge would refer to them, or useless emotions, or whatever you want to refer to them as. Sympathy, compassion, sadness, fear, grief, anything along those lines that Judge would consider to be a weak emotion. And the 2 things that I would put there that are kind of a little bit different there is that we don't know exactly what Judge considers love, but we know that at least the 3 boys do have lust, same way that Sanji does, and the fact that, they seem to lust after Nami when they see her for the first time. But they don't seem to do it as much as Sanji does, but also there seems to be more lust and not love, just given the way that they treat women, as opposed to Sanji, who, like, puts women on a pedestal. They do not, which is probably just something that they were taught by their father, that, they are expendable type of a thing. And of course, they were put through this experiment, these enhancements, when they were, still, fetuses inside of Sora. And of course, we know that Sora then drank some type of poison or chemical in order to try to counteract that, which of course resulted in her becoming very sick for the remainder of her days. But it also resulted in the three of them, the two oldest and the youngest, resulted in them having their enhancements, but Sanji did not. So, of course, those three are considered a success, and Sanji is considered a failure. And what basically ends up happening is, of course, over the next several years, all of the kids, including Reiju, who has had the modifications made to her, minus, her not having emotions anymore, or not having her negative or weak emotions, all of them are put through all of this training and everything like that to test how their exoskeletons are growing, and to test how their strength is coming along, and endurance and everything like that. And of course, Judge is observing all of this very closely, in his attempt to make sure that everything is going the way that it's supposed to. And of course, all three of the boys and Reiju are excelling in this, and Sanji is kind of getting further and further behind and being this disappointment. And of course, during this whole time frame, of course, is also when Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji all continuously bully Sanji throughout this whole time frame. They physically abuse him, and the fact that they, punch him into walls, kick him, things like that. They will specifically fight him when they know that he won't fight back. They also bully him in the fact of, saying that he's weak and useless and a failure. They bully him if they find out that he was, feeding mice and everything like that. So all they do is continually just beat him and bully him and ridicule him and everything like that. And they take a lot of pleasure in this because they, of course, have no concept of empathy or anything along those lines. And, Reiju, as I stated in her video previously, she kind of goes along with it in laughing at them, but then she, of course, goes and she, helps Sanji patch him up, give, band-aids, bandages, everything like that. And then goes and talks to her mother and tells her how horrible her brothers are treating Sanji, and how horrible Judge is and everything like that. And eventually, of course, what ends up happening is sometime during the boy's childhood, Sora dies. Now, as I stated in Sora's video and Reiju's video, and I believe in Judge's video as well, we really have no idea if Sora and the three boys ever really ended up having any type of a relationship. I mean, given the fact that she's been sick for so long, Judge, and they probably had wet nurses and nannies to take care of them, from the moment they were born, particularly with their mother being sick. And that's why she may have had a better bond with Reiju, because she was able to actually take care of Reiju, since she wasn't sick after giving birth to Reiju. That, Sora doesn't have the chance to build this bond with the other three, or with her four boys, but she still ends up with a bond with Sanji. Because he doesn't have all of those, he has all of his emotions that make him a whole human being. And those allow him to be like, no, I want to see my mother and everything like that. Whereas the other three, they don't really seem to care. I don't think throughout the entire setup, throughout all of the flashback that we get for them, that we ever get any point in time where it is stated that they go and visit their mother, or we have a picture of her with the three of them. You would think for, appearance purposes that Judge would have at least wanted a painting made of him and Sora and the three, and, and all four boys and Reiju, shortly after the boys were born. You would think you would want something like that. And even if it was a propaganda thing, it would still be like, see, the queen, and, we're a big happy family and everything like that. That does not seem to be the case as far as we can tell. The only portrait we saw was Judge and the severed heads of the four kings he overthrew and conquered. But we don't see anything of Sora developing any type of a relationship with Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji, which is probably, just contributed to, fed off of the fact that they didn't have any of these emotions that made them want to go and develop any type of a relationship with their mother. They received any praise they wanted from their father by being strong and doing good in their, tests and everything like that, and excelling in all of these different experiments that Judge was giving. And of course, he encouraged them to, beat up on Sanji, to probably an attempt to try to break Sanji's will, so Sanji would then want to become like his brothers and want to, please Judge and everything like that. But, going through and, not exactly sure what to do in regards to, they know that they have a mother, but they don't care. But eventually Sora dies. And then, of course, within that same time frame, we have it that, Sanji, they fake Sanji, Judge fakes Sanji's death and locks him up in the dungeon with the iron mask and everything like that, because, as I stated in the Judge video, it's just I don't think Judge can bring himself to kill Sanji, because some part of him, because as far as we can tell, Judge has blonde hair, and of course Sanji has blonde hair, so there's that family resemblance there, but it's also, Sanji looks like Sora. And some part of Judge may actually have loved Sora, even if he was probably most likely using her. So Judge just can't bring himself to kill Sanji. And, we know that Sanji gets locked up in the dungeon, and the three brothers are initially under the impression, like the rest of the kingdom, that their brother is dead. Then they eventually find their way down into this dungeon because they see, servants delivering food down there, and then they find Sanji, and then they ridicule Sanji even more by being like, you're not even worth father killing you, and everything like that. So there's all of that stuff that happens. And, eventually it does, of course, result in, of course, they climb the red line and end up in the East Blue, and, of course, because of Reiju's help, Sanji is able to escape. And then probably for the next, 11, 12, whatever years it is, between when Sanji escapes and then when everything happens with Whole Cake Island, the brothers, we don't know what their opinion is of Sanji. We know that eventually, the poster of Sanji came out that was him as, that was the drawing of him that made him look like Duval and everything like that. And, they probably, were making fun of it. I saw some adorable fan art that was, so there's two types of fan art I've seen with the boys. One is where their emotions can get switched on and off. And when they're on, then they're, the same way that we've seen them. But then when they're off, because they don't 100% know how to process these emotions, they're kind of trying to be nice to Sanji and kind of trying to apologize, and then they go back to being the not nice, and then Sanji just looks at Reiju and is like, I am so confused, what happened, what is wrong with them, type of a thing. And then there's the other type of fan art where it's just the fan comics where it's just they're actually nice because Sora raised them. Because Sora had a hand in raising them, and they're actually nice people. Because, either they had their emotions and Sora helped them understand them better, or let them know that it was okay to have those types of emotions, or something along those lines. But there was one that I saw that was after they got the Sanji's first wanted poster and figured out that it was supposed to be Sanji. And they're we can't let this stand. It's an insult to him, which is an insult to the Vinsmoke name if they think that this guy looks like us. So it's all of them putting on a black suit like Sanji and putting on a Sanji wig, and then trying to do better poses for the poster, and then taking pictures and then sending them into the World Economic Newspaper and being hey Morgans, you got my picture wrong, so here's some better photo shoots for you to pick from. And then they pick one of them, and that's the poster instead. And I'm just I mean, sure, fine, whatever. But it's just like, they probably ridiculed Sanji when, like, they saw that poster. And we know that they kind of tried to hunt down Duval and then realized that, no, that's not Duval, or that's not Sanji, this is Duval. Blah, 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 blah. They didn't kill Duval, obviously, after finding him, because he's still alive and he still has his, surgically kicked, beautified face. And, eventually what ends up happening is, of course, we get to the Whole Cake Island arc. And at this point in time, the siblings are kind of split into two groups. We have Reiju and Yonji on their giant snail ship on their way to Whole Cake Island. And they, of course, run into the Straw Hats on the Thousand Sunny with the Sanji retrieval team. And what ends up happening is, of course, at this point in time, Luffy is poisoned, so they're trying to see if they have, antidote, and Yonji is willing to give them an antidote. What is it? If they leave, what is it? It's like, what is it that Yonji wants? And he was like, we have this, we have an antidote that we can give you for this poison, but it's like, he's like taunting them and everything like that, but it's just like, you have to try to take it by force or something like that, which then results in Reiju showing up and kicking. Oh, sorry, boo. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry. Which results in Reiju kicking Yonji in the head and sending him flying into the water for his rudeness. And then she, of course, proceeds to, suck the poison out of Luffy. And then Yonji just kind of pouts. And then, there's, of course, this thing where it's like they keep getting, Chopper and the others keep confusing them for Sanji at first because, they kind of look like Sanji. I'm like, Yonji has green hair and Reiju has pink hair, so you would think that there would be an obvious thing of like, curly brows, yes. Actually, Sanji, no. Also, Reiju is in an outfit that Sanji would never wear. Although on that note of Reiju's outfit compared to the boys and the fact that like Reiju's outfit is like very revealing and the boys' outfit is like covers everything, there was a funny comic where it's just like, hey, why does Reiju get the slutty outfit? And then it's them in the same type of an outfit that Reiju wears, and I'm like, thank you to whoever made that type of a thing. And of course there's gender bent versions of them where it's just like Reiju is male and all four of the brothers ended up being female and all of that stuff, just like because there's gender bent versions of everything in One Piece. Unless it's Crocodile, then he's always been gender bent for whatever reason. Because Croco mom or whatever. But eventually, of course, what happens is, of course, Reiju and Yonji head off to go back to Whole Cake Island, and while they are on their way back, there is, of course, Yonji is actually, like, eyeballing Nami's wanted poster because he thinks she's pretty. And then we have it that at that same point in time, Ichiji and Niji are off on Broccoli Island because the Germa were hired there to end this 2-year war on, one side or the other and end this war. Because they had originally been getting weapons supplies from Doflamingo, but that stopped because Doflamingo got taken down by Luffy in the Dressrosa arc. So now they're like, oh, well, okay, I guess we have to hire these guys. So they hire the Germa to come and, defeat the other army, defeat the rebellion, whatever it is that's going on. And of course, we see a bunch of that happen. We see Ichiji and Niji there. And, they're dealing with enemy soldiers. We see them try to be attacked, and we see their own men jump in front of them to take the bullets instead, which, eventually we find out that these are all clones and everything like that, and that they're programmed to do that in order to, protect the royal family. And of course, they go through a bunch of that stuff. We, of course, see them, very rudely interact with the people who are in charge of the Broccoli Kingdom and, take their money and finish the thing and leave. And then, of course, eventually all 5 of the siblings have now converged back on Whole Cake Island. And there are these moments where, when Ichiji and Niji are on their way back, I think it's, okay, so where we get a little bit of a comparison or contrast between the brothers here is they all kind of seem to be on the same basic wavelength of personality, but Ichiji, as the eldest, does kind of seem to be a little bit more on the wanting to observe what's going on around him type of a thing, and not quite as willing to jump to a conclusion or jump into an attack, whereas Niji, the second eldest, and the boys, is more willing to just jump right in, and he seems to be the one that has been more bullying of Sanji over the years. Yes, Ichiji and Yonji, of course, very much took part in it, but Niji seemed to be the one that did a little bit more of it in regards to taunting Sanji when they were children and everything like that. And then, of course, Yonji is kind of, the youngest child who's trying to prove himself. And it's kind of like where their personalities all kind of differ at times. They all still have like a similar wavelength of personality, but there are differences that we see pop up. Like Ichiji, as the eldest son, is, and sometimes we see him try to be a little bit more on the stoic side of things. Like when they first see Nami, like Niji and Yonji are just like heart eyes at her, and Ichiji is trying to hide the fact that he has them by looking the other way. For an example there, for like differences in personality. He tries to be a little bit more stoic in that regard. But what ends up happening is, of course, Niji is like, yeah, we got to get out of here because we got to go because our brother is getting married and everything like that. So it's like they want to get back for the wedding, of course. And, eventually they all end up back in, the castle within the Germa kingdom setup. This is after Sanji has, been reunited with Reiju and has tried to fight Judge and has the exploding cuffs on and everything like that. And eventually this, of course, results in where, when Niji and Ichiji show up, there's like this, they arrive to this huge fanfare from, the citizens and the military and everything like that they've returned, from their mission and, and everything like that. And I think Sanji and Yonji had an interaction already where I think he kicked in Yonji's face and dented it, and then of course he had to have that go like pounded out of him to get his face back to normal. So there's that. And then of course the next big event that happens is of course the dinner, the big family meal that they have, and this is of course where everything happens with Cosette, because Ichiji and Yonji and Reiju are, Reiju's of course trying to get along with Sanji, and Ichiji is, he's kind of taunting Sanji, but he's kind of just also like, yeah, it's fine, whatever, you're here, you're not going to be here long. Yonji's the same thing, and it's Niji that is the one that's really trying to like needle Sanji to try to get like a reaction out of Sanji, because of course they've heard these stories about their brother for like, before everything happened to the 2-year time skip, particularly once they found out that Sanji was a member of the Straw Hat Pirates. And of course it's, it's like, well, his captain has this high of a bounty, and his captain just was able to just defeat Don Quixote do Flamingo and everything. So it's like, well, what are the possibilities here? He wants to see how strong Sanji actually is. They all kind of do, but Niji is kind of the one that's just like, I want to see how strong Sanji has gotten. Without our physical enhancements like what we have, I want to see how strong he has gotten on his own. Which, I mean, is a fair thing for him to want to do, just given the circumstances, but, And of course, what ends up happening is, Niji is, not eating his food, and Sanji's like, eat your food. Someone spent a lot of time making this and put a lot of hard work into it, to eat your food. And then, of course, Niji just decides to, this is how I can needle Sanji to get a reaction out of him. And, of course, he has Cosette, the head chef, is brought in, and he then ends up basically saying, your food is, this food that you made is disgusting. And then, he ends up, trying to throw the plate and the food at Cosette. And of course, she's terrified because, I doubt this is necessarily the first time something like this has happened. Maybe not specifically to her, but probably, but also to just other head chefs, the previous head chef, or whatever the case may be. And of course, Niji throws the plate at her, and Sanji dashes over, moves fast enough and grabs the plate before it's able to hit Cosette. And then, of course, he then, glares down Niji and just chews Niji out and ends up actually eating the food, even though, it falls on the floor, which, of course, disgusts Niji, disgusts the other ones as well, except for Reiju, because she finds this, the chivalry in Sanji charming. And of course, Sanji then, chews out Ichiji for trying to hurt a woman for no reason whatsoever, but trying to hurt a woman in general, specifically for no reason, and all of that. Which, of course, then results in later, we know that Niji then corners Cosette and ends up beating her up until she's unconscious, which then, of course, Sanji finds her, realizes that it must have been Niji that did this, and it's just like, who would beat a woman into unconsciousness, knows that it was Niji, and then Yonji shows up, and he's like, okay, well, we'll get her medical attention, and then he takes Sanji down to the cloning room into the Germa lab. And this is, of course, where Sanji finds out the big secret about all of, where all the Germa soldiers come from and why they're so loyal. It's because they are clones, and they are bred and programmed that way by Judge, and have been for a long time. And, so Sanji finds out about this, and he's just so disturbed by this. And this is where Yonji drops the fact that, our father has studied the lineage factor. He used to work with Vegapunk, and, they did their research and everything like that in regards to cloning humans, which, of course, we find out later also involves cloning Stussy in that regard. And, a bunch of this other stuff. And, of course, Judge then, kind of perfected it, in his opinion, into making all of these soldiers that he's able to use to fight and everything. And, of course, Iji, Nishiji, and Yonji, and Reiju are probably very, very much aware of this. It's just that, Sanji never found out, because they didn't find out probably until after Sanji ran away. And, of course, what ends up happening is, that's when Niji and Ichiji show up in the lab, and it basically results in this fight where, of course, Sanji tries to defend himself, but, because he's not exactly used to what their powers are, he does kind of get his butt kicked a little bit. And then, of course, they just kind of leave him alone, and then, Reiju shows up and tends to his injuries and has, have the talk about chivalry. And then it becomes time for when the Vinsmoke family then head to Whole Cake Island, to the Whole Cake Chateau, where they, of course, have their dinner or their lunch or so with with Big Mom and with Pudding, and for Sanji and Pudding to meet for the first time. And, of course, while they are on their way there is the moment where Nami and Luffy come running out of the seducing woods, on top of King Bomb, and of course Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji all have the heart eyes reaction to Nami. Yonji because he's seen her before, and the other two because she's Nami. And as I stated, Niji and Yonji just openly look at her that way, and Ichiji is actually trying to be very stoic and look the other way, so it's not as obvious. And so we have that involved. And then, of course, the three brothers and Reiju and Judge watch as Sanji has to, coldly try to get, turn down Luffy and try to get him to leave. And then, of course, fight Luffy and everything like that. Which, there ends up being this shift because, when Sanji tries to get Luffy to leave by being very cold to him, Ichiji kind of smiles at that. And then it shifts when Luffy and Sanji actually fight, where he actually ends up having a more serious look on his face when Sanji is trying to get Nami and Luffy to leave to just allow this to happen, and when he has to severely beat up Luffy and fight him and everything, until Luffy's on the ground and Luffy and Sanji gets back in the carriage. And there is kind of this, there is this kind of look on his face where he is a little bit more That was a little bit harsher than I was anticipating from my little brother. From, the weakling. And I think that kind of gives us, and it's not something that's really harped upon or focused on that much in the manga or in the anime, but it is kind of this thing where it's just like, he is, he has of course been under his impression the whole life that Sanji is weak and useless, and even with the fact that, Sanji has this very high bounty at that point in time, after everything that happened in Dressrosa, he's got a pretty high bounty. And, just like what they've probably heard about Sanji over the years from, what's in the newspaper and from what their, like, intelligence network probably would have been able to gather over the years. And he's like, that was a lot more emotionless type of a thing than Ichiji was probably expecting to see from Sanji in this regard. A much more harsh action taken on Sanji's part to try to get Nami and Luffy to go away. We as the audience know that it doesn't work because, of course, Sanji or Luffy is not going to abandon Sanji and everything. He's not going to abandon any of his crew. And so then basically it's, they drive off and they make their way back to the castle, and, back to, the Whole Cake Chateau, where, of course, they meet Big Mom and they have the lunch with Pudding and Big Mom and everything. And, they have all of the talking food and everything. And I just kind of think at that point in time that, like, I think that, okay, given the circumstances of the personality aspects we've seen the boys display throughout the course, I think they kind of enjoy getting the fact that they are eating things that are technically alive, and the fact that, the food talks and sings and everything like that. I think they kind of enjoy the bit of sadistic type of a thing of, oh, I'm eating something that's alive. So there is probably something there. And then, of course, we know that sometime after the lunch, they end up, the Big Mom takes the Vinsmoke family minus Sanji down to her prisoner library, where she's showing them all of these rare creatures and her books and everything. And, of course, they end up getting this kind of tour of the Whole Cake Chateau a little bit before they are, they're escorted to their guest rooms, and Reiju has her own room, and then Judge and the three boys are in their own, suite of rooms. And, of course, we know that night, basically what ends up happening is, what basically ends up happening is, of course, the boys and Judge basically end up having a bachelor party, even though, Sanji's not at the bachelor party. He's off having an emotional breakdown in the fact that, oh my god, Reiju got shot, and she was shot by Pudding, who actually has 3 eyes, who is actually, going to kill me, and they're going to kill my family, and I treated Luffy horribly, and Nami slapped me, and, Sanji's just off having, like, a crisis of faith in the background while all of that's happening. His brothers and father are just in there with a whole bunch of, ladies of the night to keep them company while they just drink and drink and drink. And, of course, we just kind of see how they just toss the women aside when they're done with them. And we see how they're just, mocking the fact that Sanji's going to have to stay here and it'll be fine. And, he'll be taken care of. He's going to be the in-law of a Yonko and everything like that, And then we'll have Big Mom, and she'll be able to help us, use her army, her crew and her forces to help us, conquer the North Blue. And we'll regain our rightful glory as, as the rulers of the North Blue with the Germa Empire and everything like that. Blah, 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 blah. World domination. And, of course, that's what happens with them all night long. And then eventually it gets to the next morning for the day of the wedding. And, of course, all of them show up in their, their very nice wedding attire and everything like that. And, they all head up to, I don't remember, I think Reiju, okay, so we know that Reiju got shot the night before, and I think it's Reiju is, she has, like, sped up healing factor because of her enhancements, So I'm assuming her leg might just be better at that point in time, but she's still wearing, I think, like really tall socks to like hide a bandage or anything like that. But of course, her brothers have no idea that she was shot. They have no idea. Sanji's the only one that knows. Judge may have cared the fact that it was one of his precious experiments that got shot, but the three boys probably wouldn't have necessarily cared beyond like, oh, you hurt our sister, therefore we're going to hurt you in anger type of a thing. Because they have the ability to be angry. We know that. They just don't know fear or anything along those lines that would be a negative emotion. And then, of course, it gets to the point where, they head up to the top of the whole cake chateau where, they're all just, intermingling with the other guests and eating and drinking and having fun and blah, 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 blah. And, talking with, Big Mom's children and the drug Peklo and the people of the from the Underworld Empire and everything like that. And all that other stuff. I wonder if Judge went over to, what was his name? Frick. It's not Drug Peklo. It's not Umit. What was his name? I don't remember. He's the one that had been the, one who, had, Duval. No. I don't remember. I'm running out of names here. I'll probably remember it while I'm editing. But, ended up Dufel. That's what it was. I was close. Dufel. I don't know if Judge and Dufel go over and, talk to each other, or if Judge even recognizes Stussy, for all I care. They're all kind of wandering around the same area, so it's possible. But, of course, then it becomes time for, the actual wedding to start, and, of course, Sanji and Pudding arrive in the teacup being carried by Zeus, which I have to admit would be a very rememberable way to enter your wedding for the guests to be like, oh, isn't that wonderful? That would be a very memorable way to enter your wedding, is on teacup on top of a talking cloud. And, of course, so everything's going on there. And then, of course, that's when kind of all heck breaks loose because, they try to shoot Sanji and that doesn't work. And then, all the Luffy's burst out of the wedding cake. And then we have what I refer to as the candy-coated Vinsmokes, where the rest of the Vinsmoke family is now trapped at their table by Sparrow's lick fruit powers, where he's got all of the candy trapping them there, which, as I stated before in the other videos in regards to this, given how strong we know that the Vinsmokes are, we know that currently they don't have their raid suits with them because those got confiscated before they went into the wedding, because you're not supposed to have weapons at the wedding. But, they still can't break out of these until Sanji comes and does it. But, what ends up happening is, of course, they're all stuck at the table and they all have guns pointed at their heads by a bunch of members of the Charlotte family. And, of course, this is when Sparrow starts mocking Judge. And, Judge has this realization that maybe taking away my children's negative emotions was not the brightest idea, because he sees Reiju, and Reiju, of course, at this point in time is aware of what was going to happen because Sanji told her, and she is aware of the fact that this is most likely going to lead to her death, and she's fine with that. And then we see Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji, and they're just laughing at this situation because they just, they end up looking at Judge and being like, because Judge is crying at this point in time because, his dreams are going up in smoke. And they're just like, ha, 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 ha. They're laughing at him because they're seeing Judge as pathetic right now. And, they don't have the slightest care that they're going to die because of their lack of these negative emotions that would result in them fearing death or having sympathy for their father at this point in time, or worry or anything along those lines, because all of that has been just taken away and repressed and everything like that. And so they have that moment there, and of course, they don't end up dying because Sanji shows up and Diablo Jambe's the table, which just cracks and, destroys all of the candy coating that's there. And of course, this time's for when Big Mom does her big scream. And, so everybody's having to cover their ears. And then Nami, Chopper, and Carrot pop out, and they pop the earplugs into each of the Vinsmoke family's ears. And then they return their raid suits to them, so they are now able to fight back. And then of course they do. We get the nice transformation sequence for all of them, which is of course based off of, it's based off of the Super Sentai Kamen Rider, and there's Power Ranger references in there. For Reiju, I said there's the Sailor Moon reference for the pretty transformation and everything like that. And, so they all transform. Then, of course, we have, the nice big family shot of them just looking badass with the fire in the background. And then, of course, this, devolves into fighting, where, Reiju goes and helps Nami against Smoothie, and Ichiji ends up going and fighting against Katakuri. And then I think there's other bits. I know at one point in time the boys end up combining their attacks in order to attack something. Niji and Yonji go off and fight other ones. And then, of course, they all end up inside of the, Beiji's big father form and inside of his castle fortress. And, Judge makes the announcement that, okay, we're going to act as decoys while Caesar flies Beiji out of here so the rest of you can escape, because of course Judge doesn't want to feel indebted to Sanji, to the Straw Hats, to the Beiji, to the Fire Tank Pirates. He doesn't want to feel indebted to any of them. And of course he's humiliated already by the fact that he allowed himself to be tricked by Big Mom and all of that. So, of course, they go out and they all act as decoys, and Luffy comes out as well and acts as decoys. Helps act as, a decoy to help the others be able to escape. And, of course, they're taking out obstacles in Caesar's way as he's flying out with Beiji and everything. And we know that, as I said, we know that Ichiji ends up fighting against Katakuri. And, of course, this is kind of where we get the reveal that even if Ichiji blows up stuff in Katakuri or at Katakuri can just reform because of his Mochi Mochi no Mi and everything. And he's just overwhelmed by fighting him. And then, of course, the Tamate Bako explodes, which, of course, results in Whole Cake Island falling and collapsing and everything. And that allows Judge and his children and Caesar and Beiji and everything like that and the others, allows them to get away and get, this head start, which is very helpful. And then, of course, we know that, Judge and the other and his children, pair off from the rest of them, and they make their way back to Saint Germain, which is the castle that the Vinsmoke family live in. That is the central castle for the German kingdom, and they make their way back there, where they then end up fighting against Nusorte, one of Big Mom's children. They end up fighting against him and several of his siblings and the forces that they brought with them in order to try to take over the Germa kingdom. So that way they could get a hold of the Germa cloning technology and everything like that. And, there ends up being, these, little fights that happen between the Vinsmoke siblings and these other Charlotte family members, and eventually the Vinsmokes win. We know that at some point in time during all of this, Judge tried to attack Big Mom, and he got very badly injured, so he's kind of out of commission for a little bit. But of course, what ends up happening is then Niji, using one of the Germa tech things that they have in order to mimic Nostorte's voice, which is very clever in regards to how they use this, and they've probably used it before in other, military, campaigns that they've done, and mimic his voice, so that way he's able to then call Montdor and tell Montdor that they defeated the Germa siblings and that the Germa army is now under their control, so that way they will then be ignored if the Germa, if they see the Germa snails showing up anywhere, they will be ignored for a little while. This, of course, works into a wonderful plan, because what ends up happening is, of course, then later when Sanji has returned to Cacao Island in order to get Luffy after he pops out of the mirror, because Luffy's going to be exhausted from fighting Katakuri, which he is. So then, Luffy needs Sanji's help to get him to safety. And Sanji shows up, gets Luffy, and is about to be attacked. And then, of course, all 4 of his siblings show up. And they fight against Charlotte Oven and his forces that are there on Cacao Island. And of course, Montour is like, wait a second, I thought that they were defeated. And then it's just like, nope, we mimicked his voice. And they're like, damn it. That's not the exact exchange, but that's the gist of it. And of course, what ends up happening is the Germa siblings, they fight against Oven's forces. They fight against the decuplets who have like the combination devil fruit, and they fight against them. And of course, during this time frame, one of them, I think it's actually Niji, that ends up slipping the black canister raid suit into Sanji's pocket. And then, or into Sanji or Luffy's pocket, one of the two. And then later they find it, and that's how Sanji has his, stealth black canister, so that way he's able to activate his raid suit. And I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I think it's either Niji or Ichiji that does it, and I think it was Niji that did it. Because I'm assuming, and this, again, is not necessarily something that's harped upon, but it's kind of like, Niji and Ichiji and Yonji have, like, seen how strong their brother is. He was able to free them from the candy coating when the others weren't. He saved them and offered them mercy in regards to, even though, 4 out of the 5 of them had, including Judge, had done nothing but be horrible to Sanji. And I don't think they would have necessarily blamed Sanji if he just saved Reiju and let the rest of them die. I don't think a lot of people would have blamed him if he decided to make that choice. But that's not the kind of person that Sanji is. Because he has his emotions. He is a whole human. And, so that happens. And of course, we know that, the Vinsmoke siblings keep fighting. And then, of course, that allows Sanji and Luffy the ability to escape and get to the Thousand Sunny. And that allows them, along with the Sun Pirates, helping to allow, Luffy and the crew to escape at that point in time. Sanji and the Sanji retrieval team, minus Pedro, allows them to escape. From there, the next time we see them is, of course, in the Germa Double Six's Awe and Emotionless Excursion cover story. And basically what ends up happening here is, we cut to the Saint Germain, or the Germa Kingdom, which has now managed to escape the whole Cake Island area, the Totland area, and we find out that Niji and Yonji were actually captured by Big Mom and her children. And, so Reiju and Ichiji decide that they are going to go back and try to save them. Judge is just kind of like defeated at this point in time and has no real desire to do anything like that. But the other two decide to go and do it. The 2 eldest go to try to save the other 2. While that's going on, we see Niji and Yonji have been captured and pinned into one of Montdoor's books. And we also know that they get punched by Pudding for how they treated Sanji while they were growing up, which is just adorable. Just adds to Pudding's character. We know that then, using Brulee's Mirror World ability, that the 2 of them, that Niji and Yonji, are taken through the Mirror World and taken back to one of the rooms, I guess, that survived within the whole Cake Chateau or so, taken back there, where they are going to basically be experimented on and dissected by Kato, Brownie, Prim, and Anana, who are, I guess, the Stabby siblings in this case. And, so that way they can learn about the modifications that the brothers have gone through. Of course, what ends up happening is, of course, Reiju and Ichiji end up showing up, and due to the distraction that is happening from Van Augur and Kuzan showing up at Cacao Island, they're then able to be like, get themselves to Whole Cake Island, get themselves inside of, you know, the laboratory area where their siblings are, where their two younger brothers are, knock out the Charlottes that are there, free them, and then on their way out, they run into Caesar Clown because he had failed escape on his own. And then, of course, because of Caesar, he's able to release this hallucinogenic gas that results in having Oven and Katakuri fight each other because they're tripping balls. And then the four siblings, along with Caesar, are able to then escape the area of Whole Cake Island and out of Totland, and finally make it back to the Germa kingdom, where, of course, Judge and Caesar are reunited. And then, of course, we get the reminiscing about the earlier days in Mads and everything like that with Vegapunk and Queen and all of that stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how they end up animating that, if at all. I hope they do, but we'll see. And what ends up happening is, of course, you know, so they're getting that. And then, of course, after they come out of it, they're like, wait a second, we were competing against each other all this time when we should have been competing against Vegapunk. So let's form Neomads instead. And they're just, you know, having this huge celebration. And we cut to where we see Ichiji and Reiju, and they're just like, both of them are fed up with Judge's ideas at this point in time. They were just like, your last idea went horrible, and all five of us almost died, and Sanji almost died, and you're still angry about the fact that you had to be saved by the one that you consider a failure, and now you're going to team up with this guy who you haven't seen in like 30-something years, depending on the circumstances, and just... why? And, you know, they're just like, they are fed up with Judge's ideas right now. And that is technically the last time that we have seen them in the manga. But I mean, like, in actual in reality, you know, they're probably listening in on, you know, Vegapunk's broadcast right now, because of course Judge and Caesar are listening to it and are angry about the fact that they think that, you know, that Vegapunk is dead and like blah, 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 blah. So, like, you know, Reiju and her brothers listening in on this would make perfect sense. And I don't know what's going to happen. I was trying to think of, like, with Reiju alone, it was just like, I'd want Reiju to show back up again and, you know, maybe be the queen of the Germa kingdom, you know, like they kicked out Judge or something and she's queen now. Because it's never revealed who is technically supposed to be Judge's heir. You would assume if it's male preference primogenitor that it is going to be Ichiji because he is the oldest boy. If it is just firstborn primogenitor, then it would be Reiju who would be the one who would be in charge, because she's actually the one that has like the full set of emotions. But I don't know. That was never anything that came up, because of course Judge does not expect to die anytime soon, even though that almost happened in the whole Island arc. But it's like, I don't know what's going to happen with the boys. I mean, it would be interesting to see them show back up again in, you know, the final battle somehow, or one of the final battles, depending on what happens with Neomads and Judge and Caesar. But I really don't have any idea as to what would be the circumstances for, like, why they would show back up. I mean, yeah, they might want to see Sanji again, but, like, I had the idea that, well, when we had been introduced to Vegapunk and everything, I had the thought that, well, maybe they could go to Vegapunk if something happens, and they could, you know, have him, you know, give them back their emotions, have them fix them, have Vegapunk fix them. I mean, that's not going to happen now because Vegapunk is dead. I mean, Lilith could possibly do it, depending on the circumstances, but again, I don't know. But, you know, or maybe Caesar does something where he messes with them and ends up giving them emotions on accident because Caesar's an idiot, and then that just makes Judge angry at Caesar, and then the boys just go through an existential crisis of their own where they're just like, oh my god, I can't believe we treated Sanji like that, and oh my god, we never got to know our mother, and Reiji, we're so sorry, and just like all that other stuff. And I'm blurry again. And it's just like, I don't know. There's different things that Oda could choose to do with them, but I'm just like, if they showed back up again and helped at some point in time with Sanji, that, you know, help Sanji at some point, that would be fine. But I really don't know what they intend to do. What Oda intends to do, and I can only predict so much. So that's what I have here. Next up for this series, this is the last one for the Vinsmoke family, for the Germa kingdom, and next I'll be moving on to some of the different miscellaneous groups of kingdoms that we get in regards to kingdoms and royalty that we know about, like the ones that were at Reverie and some of the other ones that we've heard about through the series, but they're not like, you know, major kingdoms where we spend like a huge amount of time on that island or with those people or anything like that. It's just, we've heard some bits here and there. And you know, I'll be doing those ones next, and those will be a couple of videos. And then eventually I will get to where I talk about Wano will be the next big section, and that'll have quite a few there. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!